Part 3. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 21. Wu Wu. The red sun rises in Shaoshan, the eastern land is bright, the red sun rises in Shaoshan. The loud singing echoed along with the train in the scenic mountain forest. The sun shines on his face through the window. Through the car window, he can see the dense jungle and tall and straight trees in front of him. The warm breeze blows in from the car window, making people feel particularly comfortable. Under the refraction of the car window glass, a thin face appeared in his sight. This face was completely different from his original appearance. He has very regular facial features, a strong scholarly look between his eyebrows, thick eyebrows and big eyes, and wears a small hat on his head. At this time, he glanced sideways at his hand and saw that he was holding a notebook in his hand. I saw neat lines of pen writing on the notebook, filling the page with writing. June 20, 1968, the weather was sunny. I was assigned to work as a ranger in a place called Hilinpikiu. On the day of departure, I searched for this place on the map for a long time but could not find it. They said it was a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters, but from their eyes, I only saw 4 words, poor mountains and poor waters. He closed the notebook and saw the 3 words Chen Shaokyo written neatly on the notebook. Obviously, this strange name was the role he wanted to play. Xiaoguo. While he was stunned, a girl with big braids walked up to her. Su Tong looked up and information about her already appeared in his mind. This girl's name is Fu Kaiyuling. They are middle school classmates. They grew up in a compound. They are also childhood sweethearts. The girl sat in front of him and quietly put 2 eggs into his hand. Xiaoguo, you must wait for me when we go back. Su Tong was stunned for a moment, but before he could say anything, he saw that the train had stopped, and the girls in the lead immediately shouted to her to get off immediately. Wait for me, you must wait for me. The girl waved her hands vigorously and disappeared from her sight amid the crowd's pushing. Most of the people in the carriage suddenly disappeared, and the joyful singing and laughter just now fell silent. I looked around, but I didn't see Sangu or the 3 previous teams. But my appearance has been changed, and the appearance of others is probably the same, but... He recalled what the host said when he pushed him through the door, and the pen in his hand began to scribble on his notebook unconsciously. Just as he was pondering whether this old lady was lying to him, the sound of conversation on the front seat attracted his attention. Grandpa, are there really gods? The child sitting next to him held up a little book and asked, thinking about the old man. The old man smiled and said, of course, they did many good deeds when they were alive. In the end, they sacrificed themselves, eradicated the evildoers, and were regarded as gods by people. After the old man finished speaking, the son and daughter-in-law beside him suddenly looked very ugly. They glared at the old man fiercely, and the daughter-in-law took the little book from the child's hand and threw it on the ground. The son even looked embarrassed and whispered, Dad, don't talk nonsense. All gods and goddesses are fake. People on the train all looked over, making the old man turn away in embarrassment, but he did not dare to say anything. Su Tong casually picked up the little book on the ground and flipped through it. He found that the quality of the book was like rubbish, and most of the images inside were printed as black shadows. This looks like the product of a small Sanwheel workshop, and the story inside is even more simple and ridiculous. It is said that people encountered a drought demon, and thousands of miles of wasteland yielded no harvest. Many Taoist priests and monks came to succumb to the demon, but they were all beaten to pieces by the drought demon and eaten alive. At this time, a Taoist priest from Luji came. The Taoist knew that he could not defeat Han Bie, so he lied to Han Bie that he had a panacea, and deceived Han Bie into eating him. Then he opened a hole in Han Ba's belly and killed him. Lost the Hanbao. The story was very simple and full of loopholes, but he still read it with gusto. As soon as he finished reading it, the train stopped. Chen Shaokyo. Chen Shaokyo. As soon as the car stopped, a villager wearing a sheepskin coat stood by the car window and shouted Chen Shaokyo's name. At the same time, Su Tong also heard a prompt in his ear. Main Mission 1, heading to Hilinpikyu. Mission goal, please arrive at Hilinpikyu within 38 hours. Task reminder, if I were you, I would definitely not eat too much. Chen Shaokyo. Chen Shaokyo. Seeing that the train was about to leave, but the so-called Chen Shaokyo was still not found, the herdsman old Bart became a little anxious. That's right, it's this car. Could this guy have escaped? Old Bart muttered, and then shouted against the carriage window without giving up. Chen Shaokyo. Unfortunately, no one responded. Seeing that the train was slowly moving, old Bart anxiously ran after him to get a second look. Unexpectedly, he just took 2 steps and suddenly felt someone bump into him from behind. For a moment, his foot tilted, and he watched his head hit the train's wheels. Fortunately, at this moment, someone behind him suddenly grabbed him by the collar and forcefully pulled him back. Ouch! Old Bart, who was sitting on the ground, looked at the moving train, his face turned pale with fright, and his lower body and legs were weak. If he fell in, his life would probably be decided here. Old comrade, are you okay? Looking back, he saw a young man standing behind him with a bag on his back, asking with concern on his face. No, no, no. It's okay. Old Bart said that everything was fine, but he couldn't even speak. After all, he had just passed through the gate of hell, and who needed time to calm down. Here, drink some water and take your time. Su Tong stretched out his hand and pulled him to a chair beside him, opened the kettle on his waist, and gave old Bart a few sips. This allowed the old man, who looked to be in his early 50s, to calm down. Hey, tell me, that guy just hit someone and ran away without even saying sorry. Su Tong pointed in the distance in a direction where no one was already there and cursed, no, I'll help you chase him. Old Bart was in shock, and since he hadn't received the call yet, he didn't have the intention to pursue it. He just said, forget it, thank you, little comrade. If it weren't for you, my life would have been decided here. As he spoke, old Bart took a closer look at the young man in front of him. Seeing his red lips, white teeth, regular facial features, and fair skin, he couldn't help but be startled. Are you the one from Beijing, Chen Shaokyo? How do you know? Su Tong looked surprised. Oh, I've been looking for you for a long time, little comrade. I'm from our forest farm. I was notified that I would stay here a day in advance, just in case I missed you. Old Bart slapped his thigh with a face full of joy, stood up from the chair, and held his hand enthusiastically. But wait for you saved my life just now, don't you think this is a coincidence? In fact, old Bart was very resistant to this mission. It was because of repeated instructions from above, and the leaders of the forestry specifically urged him to come one day in advance. Along the way, he almost paid tribute to the 18 generations of Chen Xiao's ancestors. It's just that if he hadn't been there just now, he would have rolled under the wheels of the car, and he might not even be able to keep his whole body. Yes, yes. This is fate. Su Tong nodded repeatedly, wondering if it was a coincidence that he was staring at him when he pulled over from the car. After the two chatted for a while, old Bart took Su Tong out of the station. In order to repay Su Tong's life-saving grace, old Bart used his own money to exchange a half-catty food stamp for 2 bowls of black jelly and a pot of old wine. When a full bowl of jelly is served, a sour vinegar smell permeates the air. A handful of green onions and a spoonful of chili are sprinkled on the dark jelly. Although the appearance is not good, the taste is delicate and refreshing. Smooth, take one bite, and feel that the suffocation accumulated in the car suddenly disappears. Su Tong took a few bites, but he remembered the task reminder and didn't dare to eat more. Seeing that he couldn't finish the meal, old Bart simply ate the remaining portion with him, licking the bottom of the bowl and drinking down not a drop of the juice. After eating and drinking enough, the two of them did not dare to delay and hurriedly set off on the road. In order to pick him up this time, the forest farm specially sent the only carriage in the factory to pick him up. Su Tong only found out after sitting on the carriage and asking. It turns out that the so-called Highland Pukio is still 1 day's journey from Luping Township where they are now. They have to travel all night and won't be able to get back until tomorrow night. Hearing this, Su Tong's mouth twitched unconsciously a few times, and he suddenly regretted not eating more. Fortunately, after the experience of starvation last time, he had already thrown a few beef patties, a few steamed buns, and a few bottles of mineral water into the prop book before entering the script world this time. The road became narrower and narrower, and there was no road at all at the back. Old Bart was used to the carriage bumping and bumping in the uneven grass, but Su Tong was almost knocked over. I don't know how long I walked, but it was already dark. The stars above are twinkling, and the stars are densely packed. In reality, some people may not be able to see them in their lifetime. Comrade Xiao Chen, look over there. From now on, you can go anywhere else you like, but don't go into that mountain over there. Su Tong sat up and looked in the direction of old Bart. He saw only a dark shadow in the distance and could not see anything. Old Bart continued, there are many seedlings over there, and outsiders like us are not welcome. Moreover, the mountains are deep and the forests are vast. If there are no acquaintances to guide the way, people will be trapped and die inside. Oh, Su Tong nodded disapprovingly. While the two were talking, the horse suddenly stopped under their feet and refused to move despite old Bart's urging. Beast, let's go. Old Bart picked up the horsewhip and whipped it hard several times, but no matter how hard he whipped it, the horse refused to move away. Just when old Bart felt angry, suddenly, he saw a blurry white shadow in the woods in the distance. The white shadow could not see its true appearance clearly, but he could vaguely see the figure of a woman. The shadow seemed to be drifting over with the wind, and at this time, a strange scream began to come from the forest nearby. Yes, yes, the old god is angry. Seeing this, old Bart seemed to remember the local legend, and his expression changed greatly. He quickly jumped out of the carriage and said, prone on the ground and kowtow vigorously to the white shadow in front of you. But the more he kowtowed, the more terrifying the screams in the surrounding woods became. Just when old Bart was so frightened that he couldn't stop shaking, Su Tong looked at the white shadow in front of him curiously, thinking that if he took off his pants and rushed forward, would she run away, or would he run away by himself? When he was struggling in his heart, his ears suddenly twitched and he couldn't help but look up at the forest beside him. He saw the sound of trees breaking in the forest above his head, as if something rolled down. His face suddenly changed and he pulled up the old man on the ground. Bart rushed forward. As soon as the two people threw themselves on the ground, a huge stone suddenly rolled down the slope with a bang sound, and the horse and cart were immediately smashed into meat patties. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 22. Da-da-da. Broken stones hit the surroundings like bullets. Su Tong's arm felt like he was hit by something, and he soon lost consciousness. Old Bart wasn't much better either. His head was smashed and bleeding, and he was indescribably miserable. After waiting for a while, the two of them slowly raised their heads. The white shadow had disappeared, and the strange screams in the forest had completely disappeared. In the dark night, the moonlight shone on the grass. When the cool breeze blew, old Bart couldn't help shivering all over. He stood up and took a look. When he saw the horse that was smashed into meat by the boulder, his eyes were filled with tears. When it got dark, I almost fainted. This is a forest farm horse. Fortunately, Su Tong grabbed the old guy in time, preventing old Bart from walking over directly. He walked to the boulder and took a closer look. good guy, this boulder weighed at least 2 tons. If he hadn't avoided it, he could have used it as dumpling stuffing now. Preferably shepherd's purse flavor. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smash his mouth, and his stomach couldn't help but growl. The old god is angry, the old god is angry. After coming back to his senses, old Bart knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing in the direction he pointed just now, begging for mercy. Old comrade, get up quickly. What kind of gods are coming? They are all fake and are feudal superstition. He imitated the expressions of the couple on the train and said seriously, believe in science and defeat all ghosts and monsters. Don't tell me, this slogan really feels righteous and awe-inspiring when shouted. But old Bart shook his head and refused to get up despite saying anything. Drop. At this time, 2 bright car lights shone in the distance, and a large military green truck drove over. The car stopped steadily and a group of people jumped out from behind the car. What happened? The 2 of them couldn't see clearly under the headlights. Only when the group approached did they realize that they were wearing olive-colored police uniforms with 2 yellow ribbons above the cuffs as police lines. The police sergeant walking in front saw the injuries of the 2 people clearly and asked quickly, what happened? It's the old mountain god. The old mountain god is angry and wants to seek our lives. Old Bart said with red eyes. A young police officer was about to scold him, but the sergeant raised his hand and held him down, shaking his head to signal them to leave it alone. Then he looked at Su Tong and found that Su Tong was also examining them. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Who are you? Take out your ID and let me see. While he was talking, 2 police officers were already standing beside him calmly. Seeing this, he quickly explained, I came to the forest farm to work as a ranger, and I have a letter of introduction. As he spoke, he began to grope around on his body. While groping, his eyes were still looking at the group of people. He wasn't sure if there would be other players in this group, and he didn't want to expose himself until the matter was clear. In this era, there was no ID card. There was only a small, square notebook with your place of origin and address stamped with a big red seal. It was regarded as an ID card. It had no technical content at all. So what is more important is whether there is a letter of introduction. With a letter of introduction, everything can be verified. The police chief took it over and took a look, and his expression suddenly softened a lot. After all, the decentralized personnel were all young intellectuals and weak scholars. After being so stimulated, he was not expected to answer anything. After a few words of comfort, the sergeant asked them to get in the car first and planned to take them to the forest farm together. As for the horse that had been smashed to death, of course it could not be wasted. He tried to pull the horse and the front half of the body back together as much as possible. As for the police chief himself, he was smoking a cigarette, squatting next to the stone, inspecting it carefully, and then led others to climb into the nearby forest to see where the stone fell. This trip takes more than 2 hours at least. He wanted to follow him to have a look, but the police officers sitting on both sides didn't allow him to get out of the car. Another hour passed before the police chief came down with someone. This time he did not sit in the truck bed, but climbed into the truck bed and sat with Su Tong and the others. He took out a cigarette and put it to his mouth. He looked at the nagging old Bart and couldn't help but narrow his eyelids. Something happened to your forest farm. I got a call from your farm early this morning and said that the director of your forest farm is dead. Hearing this, old Bart suddenly shivered all over, and his face became even more ugly. His trembling lips whispered, "It's the old mountain god who is asking for his life. It must be, yes, it must be like this. There is no old mountain god asking for his life, we found this up there." The sheriff asked someone to take out the items, which were 2 ropes. "I suspect that someone wants to kill you. When you passed by, he deliberately pushed down the stone and wanted to kill you." The sheriff kept his eyes on old Bart, hoping to read some useful information from his face. but the result was that he was completely disappointed. If someone kills us, how does he keep the horse standing still? Su Tong sat aside and asked curiously. Regarding this issue, the police chief did not explain it because he could not explain it clearly. Instead, the young police officer on the side whispered, "Didn't it say that there are seedlings nearby? Rumor has it that they seem to be poisonous." Maybe. As soon as he finished speaking, the police chief kicked him on the butt. "It's like you've seen him before." The police officer lowered his head innocently, not daring to mention the issue again. "What is the old mountain god he talks about? I am a forest ranger, so I can't even know this." Su Tong continued to ask. The sergeant lowered his hat and shielded his eyes. "An old case. The news we know is that a small tribe in the mountains fought with another tribe. Finally, the small tribe suddenly caught fire at night, and the whole tribe died. Some people said that the old mountain god would avenge them." As he spoke, he did not forget to point at old Bart. He was an Orion back then. He was a direct witness to this incident. He knows more about the specific things than we do. Hearing this, Su Tong couldn't help but look at old Bart one more time, becoming increasingly curious. It seemed that the script this time was far more mysterious and complicated than he thought. This couldn't help but make him look forward to it even more. Especially the so-called poison in the mouth of the police officer just now added a bit of mystery. Although the carriage was smashed to death midway and was delayed for several hours, the speed of this large Jifang truck was surprisingly fast. After Su Tong sat in the car and took a nap, the car had already entered the forest farm. Main Mission 1, Highland Pukio. The mission is completed. Under the cold prompt, there was no prompt for the second task. Obviously, you need to find clues to the mission yourself, but since the main mission brought you here, it means that the clues to the next mission must be here. He was not in a hurry, and took the time to be a bystander, intending to sort things out first. As for what the police chief said last night, he didn't believe a word of it, especially the two ropes, which had brand new rope ends that didn't look like they had been used. Even if these two ropes were found at the scene, what would it mean? A 2-ton boulder was pushed down with just 2 ropes? It's still reasonable for you to add some leverage. After the car drove into the forest farm, they saw several old people standing at the door waiting. After seeing old Bart, everyone was stunned for a moment. When they saw the horse with only half of its body left, the faces of these old people became even more ugly. Old Bart was helped out of the car by everyone, looking shocked and obviously unable to figure out the reason. As for him, he was placed in a small room on the side of the forest farm. After all, the director of the forest farm died suddenly, and no one was able to make arrangements for him for a while. But having said that, the food at the forest farm was better than he thought. Millet mixed with wild vegetable soup and 2 yellow-faced steamed buns. The taste was a bit rough, but it tasted really delicious. Compared to his good appetite, others in the cafeteria seemed to have little appetite. Several old people looked worried. As for the police chief and his party, their faces were even more confused. Su Tong was too lazy to listen to them discussing the case and walked out after eating. Not long after I walked out of the cafeteria, I saw a fast horse rushing into the forest farm from a distance. On the horse's back sat a girl wearing a fur coat. She looked to be in her early 20s. As soon as she got off the horse, she ran straight to old Bart's house. Room went. "Don't look, that's old Bart's daughter and a ranger at the forest farm. It sounds like you're taking over from her." A strange voice came from behind him. Su Tong didn't look back, he just looked at the girl's back and asked, "How could you have thought it was me?" "Hey, my name is Sangdog. I don't have the ability to touch a dog's nose. How can I be called Sangdog?" The morning dog walked up to him, put his hands in his sleeves, stretched out his hands and put on a sheepskin coat, and he looked like an uncle in his early 40s. He squatted next to Su Tong and said, "Let's cooperate." You should be a newcomer who has just completed the novice mission. If you cooperate with me, our probability of survival will be higher. Su Tong did not answer Mangu, but asked, "What happened last night?" "I don't know, it's a bit evil," Sangu said, pulling up his sheepskin coat and exposing a slit for Su Tong to see. Under the clothes, he saw a brand new wound, spreading from Sangu's shoulder to his chest. "Last night, that old guy went crazy. I almost got him to death by him. But I heard that the farm director is already 60 years old." Su Tong couldn't help but be a little surprised when he saw the wound of the missing dog. He didn't know how strong Sangu was, but such an injury was definitely not something a 60-year-old man could inflict. So Zihu, the old man, was like a little Superman before he died. He had a gold dagger in his hand and almost opened me up. Speaking of what happened last night, Sangu's face was full of depression, and now he was still scared when he thought about it. Golden dagger. Su Tong was keenly aware of the important information revealed in Sangu's words, and was about to ask for more information. Not far away, a group of young people walked towards the side. Sangu glanced at him and couldn't help but sneered, "You are in trouble. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 23. Trouble. Looking at the group of young men walking towards him in the distance, Su Tong couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He, the forest farm has a lot of monks and a lack of meat. Old Bart's girl is the treasure of the forest farm. When you come, she will go out and go to the town health center. If it were me, I would also cause trouble for you. The morning dog grinned and explained that he had no intention of helping. He stood up and walked back. Before leaving, he did not forget to say to Su Tong, "I'm waiting for you in the poplar forest behind me tonight. Come if you are willing to cooperate." Looking at the departing figure of the morning dog, Su Tong couldn't help but frown. Looking at the water on the ground, he glued some of his fingers aimlessly to write on the stone slab at his feet. "That's the student of yours who came to our place to jump in line." Several young people had already walked up to Su Tong while they were talking. The leading young man, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, glared at him fiercely, "Get out of here, we don't welcome trash like you here. Yes, get lost. You are just a skinny guy with only 3 ounces of bones. How can you be a forest ranger? I'm not afraid that a blind bear will come and snatch you away at night." Hearing them yelling and cursing, Su Tong ignored them and just looked at the painted 9-gate palace at his feet intently. After casually drawing an X in the upper left corner, he looked up at the leading young men and took out a beefcake from his arms. The fragrant meat cakes were so shiny that several young people stared at them and couldn't help but swallow and spit. "I'm afraid they may not be able to eat this even during the Chinese New Year. What's more, they came back from the forest garden in a hurry and didn't even have time to eat. They couldn't stand the temptation. Want to eat? Come and play with me for a while. If you beat me, I will give you another pancake." He pointed to the 9-square palace painted on the ground and the small puddle beside it, and said to the leading young people, "Ha, what's the trouble with me? I'm just afraid that you can't afford to lose and cry." Several young people looked at each other and smiled. They had played this kind of children's game a lot. It is not an exaggeration to describe it as a piece of cake. "I'll give you a pancake first. If you lose once, I'll give you a delicious one. I also have 2 boiled eggs, a pancake, and 2 packs of biscuits. If you lose, answer my question. How about it?" Su Tong took out the eggs from his arms and shook them. Boiled eggs were not something they could eat. It took a month for them to take out the eggs laid by the old hens in the forest farm and make 2 dishes. In this way, these young people can't eat it at all. What's more, there are rare goods like biscuits, and Su Tong gave them a biscuit to eat first, so there is no reason why they would not be happy. I come first, I come first. Several people took the pancakes and tore them open to each other. While eating the pancakes, they played Jagaga with him. Several people played together, and everyone was particularly engrossed in the game. Once he won, Su Tong immediately took out the delicious food and gave it to him. However, Su Tong still won once, and it was a fluke. What happened last night? He asked several young people. Mentioning what happened last night, several people couldn't help but eat the meatloaf in their mouths. After looking at each other, they whispered. It was said that the director was poisoned, but the old man said it was the revenge of the old mountain god. But there is another theory that he dug up a treasure from somewhere not long ago, and there was a curse on the treasure. Yes, that's the gold dagger. It's pure gold. It's so long and has a gem the size of a dove egg inlaid on it. Another young man started gesticulating. After saying that, he was kicked by the young man at the side. He pointed at the Jagaga on the ground and said, "That's a problem. Hurry up." Seeing this, Su Tong simply gave them all the food he had on hand. "If there's no more left, I'll give it all to you." After saying that, he patted the dirt on his body and stood up. "Hey, why don't you give up? Didn't you lose everything?" Several people were enjoying themselves while sharing the meatloaf and eggs. Seeing that he was about to leave, some people couldn't help but ask. Su Tong waved his hand without looking back. "No more pee, no more pee, maybe next time. No more pee." Several people looked at each other, wondering what the relationship between the Jug Palace and urine was. In the midst of confusion, someone suddenly seemed to understand something and looked at the dried puddle beside him with wide eyes. After a while, the meatloaf in my hand suddenly lost its flavor. Vomit. When the old people at the forest farm walked out of the cafeteria, they saw several of their young men lying on the ground vomiting unconscious. When I walked over and took a look, when I saw the eggs and meat patties they threw on the ground, my face turned black immediately. I raised my stick and beat them until they cried for father and mother. "Hey, Comrade Xiao Chen, you came back just in time. We were planning to find you." As soon as he arrived in front of the hut, the deputy director of the forest farm came over to meet him and took his hand enthusiastically. "I'm sorry, Comrade Xiao Chen, there was an accident at our forest farm yesterday and I couldn't contact you in time. Terribly sorry." The deputy director looked to be in his 50s, and he was also an old leader of the forest farm. Su Tong waved his hands, showing a harmless smile, and couldn't help but look behind the old leader out of the corner of his eye. I saw a young girl standing behind him, who was the daughter of old Bart just now. She is in her early 20s, probably because she has been exposed to wind and rain all year round in the mountains. Her skin is slightly darker than that of a normal girl, and her eyebrows have a kind of heroic spirit that ordinary men don't have. "Hello, Comrade Xiao Chen, my name is Yang Guanjin, you can just call me Xiao Jin. Thank you for saving my father. This is the gift I prepared for you. Don't be polite." Xiaojin speaks concisely and clearly, and her voice is loud and clear, with a straightforward attitude that makes it easy for people to like her. It's no wonder that these young people in the forest farm seem to be incompatible with her. As she spoke, she gave him a deerskin coat. There were several pockets sewn on the deerskin coat, and the cuffs had patterns of fish and flowers. It looked like it couldn't have been made in a day or two. The deputy director patted him on the shoulder and said, "Xiao Jin is from the Bai tribe. This is their Bai tribe's unique costume. He has been making this costume for half a month. It is very precious. I heard old Bart said that you saved him twice. I gave this dress to you, Xiao Chen, please cherish it." After saying that, his voice changed. "Since you are here too, let Xiaojin take you into the mountains to get familiar with it. Next month, she will be transferred to work at the health center in the town. From now on, The forest protection work will be handed over to you. Got it? Serve the people. Okay. You guys should be busy then. I still have things to do over there. I will hold a reception banquet for you after the recent troubles at the forest farm are resolved. After the deputy director finished speaking, he hurried to the office to discuss how to deal with the old director's death. It's already very late today. You've been traveling for so long. You should have a good rest tonight. I'll take you into the mountains early tomorrow morning. Su Tong nodded with a smile and watched Yang Guanjin leave, the smile on his face gradually fading away. He looked thoughtfully at the deerskin coat in his hand, turned around, imitated the tone and expression of Yang Guanjin just now, and walked step by step towards his room. Every expression, every detail, even the way Yang Guanjin looked at him and the angle, except for the completely different face, everything else was exactly the same. It wasn't until he walked to the door and put the deerskin coat in his hand in the air that his demeanor returned to normal. Strangeness. He picked up his deerskin coat from the floor and muttered a few words before turning around and closing the door. At night, after a hurried meal, he did not go back to his room, but instead walked towards the poplar forest behind the forest farm. As expected, the mourning dog was sitting on the big rock in front of the woods waiting for him. Seeing him coming, he casually took out a burger and gave it to him. Would you like some? Su Tong patted his belly and looked full, but did not take the burger from the mourning dog's hand. What kind of cooperation method? The mourning dog jumped down from the stone and said, I have special props. As long as I smell it, I will definitely recognize it. The special smell on your body cannot be smelled by others, but it cannot be hidden from me, so when you come, I will recognize it. I'll recognize you. Su Tong said nothing and looked at the mourning dog quietly. The other three guys haven't come yet, which means their missions are different from ours, and may even conflict. Do you think the two of us can be their opponents? Sangu stared at him with his eyes, and his tone gradually became colder. I'll give you a piece of advice. In the script world, the most terrifying thing is not the weird things, but the people. Looting and killing will not stop here, but will become more vivid, because those rare props and indispensable script points can be obtained through trading or plundering. Sometimes the reward for killing a player is much higher than an adventure in a scripted world. How about giving this to you to show my sincerity? The mourning dog took out another small bottle and handed it to him. This is a temporary amplification potion. After drinking it, no matter how injured you are, it can give you 30 minutes to save your life. This is a rare item. How about it? It's interesting. Su Tong took the bottle and put it in his props book. Sure enough, the tips given in the props book were the same as what Mango said. It's a good thing, but are you sure I'm worth the price? He took the bottle in his hand again and looked at the mourning dog with a half smile. Mango shook his head directly. It's not worth it, but I have no choice. Forget it, I won't take advantage of others. He put down the potion in his hand and left without looking back. Sangu was stunned, and his face suddenly turned ugly. He thought it was a sure thing, but he didn't expect that this guy actually refused. Don't go. Seeing that Su Tong was about to leave, Sangu hurriedly called to him and said helplessly, I received a side mission to protect the golden dagger, which means there will definitely be something wrong with the dagger tonight. I need someone to help. After saying this, Su Tong received a task prompt. Sangu has initiated a task sharing with you. Side mission, Golden Dagger. Mission goal, a dagger made of gold will naturally attract the greed of countless people. It is destined to be a sleepless night tonight. Protect it and don't let anyone steal it. Task tip, the value of the dagger may not be money. Looking at the mission information sent by the mourning dog, Su Tong finally showed a smile on his face. He put the potion away and said with a smile, oh, I forgot to tell you, actually, I am a veterinarian. Hearing this, Sangu's eyes widened and he stared at Su Tong. You're tricking me. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 24. Clatter. A wisp of fire lit up in the darkness and quickly went out. With the flickering light of the cigarette butts, the two police officers took a deep breath, looked at the surrounding mountains and forests, and cursed at their bad luck. "It's bad luck, it's such a cold day and I have to stay on night duty," a police officer said cursingly. Another police officer on the side glanced at the cement room behind them and frowned after hearing his companion's complaints. "Keep your voice down, Captain Wang will scold you if you hear this." The room behind the two people was the room where the director's body was stored. The golden dagger was also placed there. These were important evidences. Now, except for police officers and sergeants, not even the deputy chief is allowed to enter that room. The two police officers on guard were smoking cigarettes and complaining about their bad luck. Little did they know that in the small bamboo forest not far from them, someone was almost cursing in their hearts. "Don't be angry, I'll show you my feelings." Su Tong lay next to the mourning dog and raised his index finger and thumb. But Mangu had a dark face and said nothing, staring at the cement house in front of him, turning a blind eye to the funny Su Tong beside him. No wonder he was so angry. He suffered a big loss this time. He thought he was a doctor. Even a novice with little fighting ability could save lives at critical moments with the help of a doctor. In the end, this guy actually told himself that he was a veterinarian. It feels like spending a lot of money to buy a BMW, but when you take a closer look, it turns out to be a Baojun. The key is that this profiteer not only refused to refund the money, but also told himself righteously, "Baojun is also a horse." Facing the anger of the lost dog, he was not surprised at all. In fact, when Sangha gave him such an important prop so generously, he understood that Sangha valued his purpose. It was he who told the lost dog that his nickname was Doctor. Doctor, this title, carries a very strong label. Calling yourself such a title is nothing more than the most direct expression of the value of your existence. So that precious bottle of potion was obviously not for him to drink, but for him to drink, so that he could buy more time to save him when he was seriously injured. Don't be like this, veterinarians are doctors too. Su Tong lay on the lawn and counted his achievements to the mourning dog, such as delivering a horse, sterilizing a dog, and depilating a chicken. Chickens still need to shed their hair, the mourning dog looked surprised. Otherwise, it won't be easy to eat without hair removal. The lost dog was instantly desperate. If it hadn't been for this moment, based on the principle of one more person, more effort, he would have wanted to kill this guy now. Just as the two were talking, a moist cold wind blew in the air. The two people lying on the lawn felt tense and their eyes suddenly became wary. I didn't know when a thick layer of white mist floated in the air. The white mist came so fast that it didn't give anyone any time to react, and it turned the surrounding area completely white. "Hoo!" a scream came, followed by a bang gunshot. After Su Tong and Sangha looked at each other, they quickly got up from the lawn. I saw Sangha taking out a machete, ignoring Su Tong beside him, and rushed out with a strong step. Sangha was extremely fast, and seemed to have some ability to accelerate, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He did not have the ability of a lost dog, but this did not hinder him. After calling out the prop book, he released a palm-sized paper man. The paper man was not big, but he held a shining silver paper knife in his hand. After Su Tong activated the paper control operation, the paper man seemed to have come to life. After circling lightly around him, just put it gently on his back. The fog in front of my eyes is getting thicker and thicker, and it seems that I can't even see my fingers. Suddenly, a rapid sound of breaking wind came towards him in the air. The air was mixed with the pungent smell of blood. He had no time to think about it and hurriedly ducked sideways. At the same time, the paper man behind him rushed up and raised his hand. The silver knife struck behind him. Even though the paper man is only as big as a palm, after being blessed by the spirit enchantment technique, the paper man has surprisingly high strength, and although its strength cannot be compared with that of an adult, its speed is extremely fast. Especially the silver knife in its hand, which was made from the few silver foils he had. Whether it is willfulness or strength, it is no worse than an ordinary blade. It's a pity that the total weight of the paper man cannot exceed 30 grams, otherwise he would be able to arm the paper man to the teeth. For a moment, blood spattered on his face. He didn't even have time to see clearly what was rushing toward him. He only heard a scream that didn't sound like an ordinary creature at all. Huh. The familiar screams were exactly the same as when they were attacked last night, which gave him a bad feeling. It seemed that the other party was not coming for the golden dagger, but more like he was coming for himself. The weird screams became more and more harsh. But it's hard to tell where they are. They seem to be moving left and right, erratically, and it's even difficult to tell how many there are just by their voices. Suddenly, out of the white mist, a thin black claw came out and grabbed Su Tong's shoulder. The sharp nails on the claw tore open his clothes and clawed towards his neck. He ducked sideways, and a slender gash was torn open on his shoulder. The monster that attacked him quickly hid in the white mist, much faster than he thought. It seemed that after the attack was successful, there were more and more strange screams around him, as if something was surrounding him. Looking at the bloody wounds on his shoulders, he raised his brows, with a glint in his eyes, stood up, and suddenly accelerated towards the left. Such an act that seemed to be escaping undoubtedly made the monsters surrounding him even more excited. They let out harsh screams and chased after him. While running wildly, he did not forget to call out a paper man again. This paper man was obviously smaller than the one before. He quickly stuffed something into the paper man's arms and controlled two paper men, one on the left and one on the left. One right flies out. Perhaps because he was running too fast, or perhaps because his vision was too poor, Su Tong's feet swayed and his body flew out. He rolled on the ground a few times before sitting up in embarrassment. The moment he got up, two black shadows in the white mist rushed towards his back. Looking at the claws that were close at hand, Su Tong's eyes gradually became lost in a gap, and the corners of his lips moved slightly, twist. The moment he finished speaking, two black shadows quickly flashed in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. At the same time, something seemed to be straightened in the air. Puff. The two black figures that had already rushed in front of Su Tong suddenly stopped in mid-air, and their heads were actually cut off in mid-air. Then with the inertia of the impact, the bodies fell hard to the ground and rolled in front of Su Tong. In the air, a piece of paper was stretched flat and gradually softened after being stained with blood. Two paper figures, one on the left and one on the right, flew to his side. Looking at the corpse on the ground, Su Tong finally understood what the thing that attacked him was. It was actually a monkey. The hair of these monkeys is dark brown, and their bodies are larger than ordinary macaques. What is elusive is that the monkey's eyes are actually covered with black cloth strips. Someone is controlling it. Seeing this, he couldn't help but think of the scene where he was almost killed by the big rock last night, and he became more suspicious in his heart. He didn't know why the other party tried every means to kill him. Just when he was confused about this, there were more and more strange screams around him. From time to time, the shadow of a monkey flashed past him. Boom. Fortunately, at this time, a burst of gunshots came from not far away. Suddenly, the monkeys paused, raised their ears as if they had received some order, and soon disappeared into the white mist. Following the sound of footsteps, Su Tong's heart moved, and he quickly released the paper control technique and put the two paper figures in his pockets. At the same time, he also threw the monkey's body into the prop book, threw himself on the ground, and shouted loudly in the direction of the footsteps. "Is there anyone? Come and save me. There's someone over there." Hearing the sound, The footsteps got closer and closer. When the leader, Sheriff Wang, led the people over, he fell to the ground with a look of horror on his face, covered in blood. It's Xiao Chen. Seeing this, the deputy director and several young people who were following him quickly pulled him up from the ground. Chief Wang glanced at Su Tong suspiciously. After leaving a police officer behind, he immediately led people to rush to the cement house not far away. Strangely enough, the white mist just now completely dissipated. The two police officers responsible for guarding the body and evidence fell to the ground, but they were still alive and just fainted. At this time, the screams of villagers came from the cement house. There is someone here who is still angry. Come and help. Several villagers rushed in and soon took out the dying dog. When they saw the injured dog, everyone involuntarily took a breath. I saw the golden dagger inserted into his lower abdomen. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 25. Zi. The plump mutton skewers overflow with golden oil under the charcoal fire. The oil drips on the charcoal fire, filling the air with a plump aroma. Team leader. The mourning dog sitting on the beach chair raised his head and looked at the team members waving to him, with a smile on his lips. Captain, come quickly. We have completed this mission and it's time to celebrate. Two teammates stepped forward and took his arms, pulling him out of his beach chair and over to the grill. A bunch of deliciously grilled skewers was handed to his hand. Just as the mourning dog was about to open his mouth to eat, he suddenly smelled a strong smell of blood. When he took a closer look at the skewers in his hand, he was dumbfounded. I saw that the skewers in my hands were actually bloody eyeballs. Eat quickly. Try my handiwork. His teammates urged him enthusiastically, and Sangu's scalp went numb. He threw away the skewers in his hands and raised his head angrily. What he saw was bloody heads. Everyone's eyes were gouged out, and they were empty. His eye sockets were like abyss staring into himself. It's because we are blind that we recognize you as our captain. Eat quickly, eat quickly. Ah! Looking at the teammates surrounding him, Sangu finally screamed unbearably. His closed eyes suddenly opened, but the sun shone on his face, and what he saw was the roof full of salted fish. Phew! It turned out to be a dream. Realizing that he was actually having a nightmare, Sangu let out a long breath. Woke up. At this time, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. He turned around and saw Su Tong sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a book in his hand and looking at him with a smile. It is you. Seeing that it was Su Tong, Sangu breathed a sigh of relief, but soon he suddenly remembered something and reached out to touch his lower abdomen. The abdomen that was supposed to be pierced was now tightly wrapped with gauze. Did you save me? His heart moved and he asked Su Tong. No, we are both lucky. Chief Wang and others rushed here with his people. If it were later, it would be hard to say. Su Tong briefly explained what happened yesterday. At that time, the injured dog was seriously injured and there was no doctor at the forest farm. Yang Guanjin, the only one who knew some medical knowledge, was even more frightened by his wounds. She had only learned simple care, bandaging, and medicine, but she had no idea how to deal with such a serious wound. At the critical moment, he was ordered to stitch up his wounds, otherwise what was lying on the bed now would probably be a corpse. Call. Hearing this, Mangu finally let out a long breath, sat up straight from the bed, grinned and said, Hey, I didn't realize that you are a pretty reliable veterinarian. Su Tong didn't speak. He glanced at the wound on his abdomen and frowned. Seemingly knowing what he was going to say, Sangu smiled mysteriously and took out a medicine bottle in his hand. Don't worry, with this, as long as I don't die, any multiple injuries can be healed quickly. As he spoke, he drank half the bottle of potion in one gulp, and threw the remaining half directly to Su Tong. Here you go, take it as reward, it can save your life at a critical moment. Su Tong took it and took a look. There was a bright red potion in the glass bottle, and he threw it into the prop book. Props, Muscle Recovery Potion, Initial. Instructions for use: after taking it, it can quickly recover muscle damage and treat physical damage suffered by the body. Note: for injuries such as amputated limbs, disability, and functional loss that cannot be recovered, if the wound lasts for more than 2 days, the effect of the medicine will be halved, and if the wound lasts for more than 5 days, it will be ineffective. With so many medications, I think you are more of a doctor than me. Su Tong looked at the medicine Mango gave him and couldn't help asking curiously. At this, Mango smiled and said with a proud expression, "Hey, this potion is a good thing. You can't sell it even at the exhibition. Only I can buy it through some special channels with script points." Exhibition? Su Tong raised his eyebrows. Yes, it happens about once every Sunday. You can enter the exhibition hall through the script hall. There is a place dedicated to players for trading. In addition to drugs, there are many props you can't think of. Sangu explained while removing the gauze from his abdomen. However, as the gauze was untied, the smile on Mango's face suddenly froze, and he stared at the stitched wound on his abdomen with wide eyes. "Don't tell me, you humming sewed this for me." He suddenly raised his head, stepped forward and grabbed Su Tong's collar. Su Tong expressed great regret for this. "Sorry, the forest farm, no, I think in this era, there should be no absorbable sutures, so I can only use ordinary cotton thread to suture your wound." "Asshole. I didn't ask you this. What's going on with this damn Peppa Pig?" The mourning dog pointed to his belly, and saw that on his thin belly, cotton threads embroidered a Peppa Pig pattern on his belly. This made the self-proclaimed straight man Sangu almost want to strangle the bastard in front of him to death. "Remove the thread for me immediately," he growled, pointing at his belly. Regarding this, Su Tong expressed regret again. The effect of the muscle recovery medicine is so good. Now the thread and the flesh have grown together. If you want to remove it, you can remove it. You need to use a knife to reopen the wound. Are you sure you want to remove it? The mourning dog looked at his belly and couldn't help but hesitate. "Really? Real?" Su Tong put his hand on his left chest and assured the mourning dog, "I swear on my conscience. Only a ghost can believe your conscience." The mourning dog cursed, but still let go of his hand, and found a piece of clothing to put on. "Last night, when I broke in, I was plotted by someone. The other party seemed to be good at mental attacks. We encountered a tough problem this time." Sangu talked about last night's experience. After he broke into the house, he wanted to fight with the opponent. As a result, the opponent was not only much stronger than him, but also had some kind of mental attack. The most troublesome thing was that his own attack was completely useless. Have an effect. Whether it was a knife attack or his ability, it seemed that the other party had used some special means to resist it. "Then do you see the other person's appearance clearly?" Su Tong asked. "Male, he is probably in his early 40s, and his height should be about 1.75 meters. Sangu tried hard to recall the details of that time, but he couldn't see the man's face clearly. The guy's face seemed to be covered with something and he couldn't see clearly at all. Su Tong dragged his chin, and had already sketched out a vague outline in his mind based on Mango's words, but no one in the forest farm matched this outline. In other words, the person who took the golden dagger last night was not from the forest farm. No. There should be another person. He thought of those monkeys. It was impossible for the other party to fight the mourning dog and control the monkeys to attack him at the same time. In other words, there are still people at the scene, and this person is coming for him. Thinking of this, Su Tong threw out the corpse of the monkey he killed yesterday. Seeing such a big monkey, the mourning dog couldn't help but open his mouth in surprise. After carefully examining the monkey's body, he thought about it. Could it be that there were two people last night, one went to grab the knife, and the other came to kill you. After saying that, he couldn't help but look at Su Tong carefully, but I don't understand why the other party wants to kill you. As a poor student, what threat can you pose to make the other party kill you again and again? Su Tong didn't think about this question yet. Just when he was about to ask Sangu what was special about the golden dagger, Sangu suddenly waved his hand to indicate that someone was coming, and heard footsteps approaching outside the door. Uncle Li. After a while, Yang Guanjin's shout came from outside the door. As the door was gently pushed open, she saw her walking in with a basket of eggs. Seeing the mourning dog standing up from the ground, his little face suddenly panicked. Uncle Li, why are you getting up? Come on, lie down quickly. Your injury is so serious. What if the wound opens? After saying that, he did not forget to complain to Su Tong aside, you two, why don't you watch more? Yang Guanjin said that he was about to check the wound of the mourning dog. The scared dog hurriedly lay back on the bed. No, my injury is no longer in the way, it's not in the way anymore. The mourning dog didn't want Yang Guanjin to find out that his wound had completely healed, and he didn't want her to see Peppa Pig on his belly. Seeing the mourning dog's persistence, Yang Guanjin could only let him have his way, put the eggs next to the table, and said, Fourth uncle, Captain Wang didn't expect that this time things would be so dangerous. He originally wanted to come to express condolences to you, but he got a call from above saying that an expert team was coming. He hurried in before dawn last night. I drove the car to pick it up. This egg is specially sent by Captain Wang to express his condolences to you. Expert team. Su Tong and Sangu looked at each other and had a bad feeling about each other. Yang Guanjin nodded and continued, yes, I heard that a great expert came from the capital and happened to be inspecting our county. I don't know who leaked the news and said that a gold dagger was unearthed here, so he hurriedly took it with him. Now that people are here, I guess it's almost time to come back. As soon as Yang Guanjin finished speaking, the three of them heard the honking of a car from outside the forest farm. Look, CAO is here. I'll go take a look. Fourth uncle, please rest more. Yang Guanjin said and went out, leaving Su Tong and Sangu alone looking at each other. Go outside and see. The mourning dog wanted to go out, but was stopped by Su Tong. You were stabbed last night and half of your life was lost. Now you run out? Isn't this a self-inflicted crime? What should I do? Sangu frowned. He wanted to confirm as soon as possible whether the so-called experts were the team members he was worried about. If it is true, the two of them will be even more passive in the future. They will inevitably be squeezed out by these people, or they may not necessarily be used as cannon fodder. Su Tong slowly turned around and looked at the mourning dog. Actually, I have another way. What? Poof. Sangu's brows moved, and as soon as he opened his mouth, his eyes suddenly glared, and when he lowered his head, he saw a silver dagger inserted into his lower abdomen. Su Tong leaned forward and moved his lips slightly, saying in a very soft voice, being a dead man is the best way. Sorry, I had stomach trouble again today. The pain was excruciating. I couldn't hold on anymore and went to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor said it was acute gastritis. I struggled for a long time and the time was delayed. I can only update one today. I will take a rest tomorrow. Continue updating again. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 26. Welcome. I didn't expect that a place as small as ours could receive guidance from a great expert like Mr. Zhou. The deputy director excitedly held the gray-haired old man in front of him. Although the two are not much different in age, the other is already a well-known archaeology professor in the country and a well-known figure in the archaeological community. It's us who are causing trouble. Zhou Huazheng patted the deputy director's hand. Normally, this matter has nothing to do with us, but the golden dagger is extraordinary and seems to be closely related to an ancient ruins we are looking for, so I took the liberty to disturb you. Yes, yes, let's not talk about it here, let's talk about it after we go in. The deputy director was particularly enthusiastic. In fact, he could see clearly that Zhou Huazheng and his group were here for the golden dagger, but what did this matter have to do with him? No matter whether the old farm director's case can be solved or not, the dagger here, whether as a murder weapon or an antique, is unlikely to fall into his hands, let alone stay in the forest farm. He just needs to do his own thing. Thinking of this, he glanced sideways at Sheriff Wang beside him, and saw that the sheriff's face was particularly ugly. It is said that this thing is a murder weapon, and no one is allowed to visit it at all, let alone take it for study, but this old man Zhou's reputation is so great that the higher ups want to sell his face. The group of people walked forward talking and laughing. At this time, a young man standing behind Zhou Huazheng suddenly interrupted and asked. When we came here, we heard that someone tried to steal the dagger last night. Thanks to someone fighting to the death to protect him, I wonder how that person's injury is now. Can we visit him? Zhou Huazheng was particularly concerned when he heard this. Yes, once such an important cultural relic is lost, we will be the sinners of history. We must do our best no matter what. This. The deputy director hesitated. After all, Li Laoxi's injury was too serious. So many people ran over, which was not conducive to his cultivation. Don't worry, I have professional medical staff here, and they also bring anti-hemorrhage and anti-inflammatory drugs, just in time to give this hero a checkup. Zhou Huazheng pointed to the three people following him and said. I saw the smallest young man among the three patting the medical kit on his waist. Now the deputy director couldn't refuse any more. Just when he was about to nod and agree, a rapid scream came from the distance. Everyone turned around and saw that it was Su Tong. He ran over from a distance with a look of embarrassment on his face, shouting as he ran, No, no, Li Uncle Li he can't survive. What? The deputy director and others looked at each other, and even Yang Guanjin couldn't help but be surprised. Weren't you fine just now? Fourth uncle's wound suddenly burst open and the bleeding couldn't stop. He raised his hands stained with blood, his face was full of panic, and his eyes were full of uneasiness and helplessness, like a child looking at a fire but not knowing how to remedy it. Quick! Zhang, hurry up and save people. People's lives were at stake, so Zhou Huazheng hurriedly asked the three people behind him to rescue people. The deputy director, who was old, even hurriedly ran ahead to lead the way. But when everyone arrived, they saw Li Si lying on the bed without making a sound. Zhang Hu walked forward with the box in his arms and carefully checked whether it was the pulse or pupils. After careful inspection, he looked back at his companions behind him, nodded, and said regretfully, I'm late. If I had come half an hour earlier, maybe it would have been better. There is help. How so? The remorseful eyes of the deputy director gradually turned to anger. When he looked back, he saw Su Tong standing behind him with a look of confusion on his face. He suddenly became angry. Didn't you say that the wound has been treated? What's going on? I knew it, you students can only talk and you can't accomplish anything. Su Tong looked at the looks from the people around him, his eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears, but in the end he lowered his head silently and clenched his fists without saying a word. You're still aggrieved? Who said you learned first aid in school? The deputy director kicked him up and knocked him to the ground. Fortunately, everyone around him hurriedly stopped him and pulled the already furious deputy director away. Sheriff Wang first checked Li Si's body, then pulled back the quilt and saw that the gauze on the wound was stained red with blood. Then he walked to Su Tong and looked at him sitting on the ground without saying a word. He sighed, It's not your fault. We were careless. Did fourth Uncle Lee say anything before he died? Was there anything unusual? Performance. He shook his head, but seemed to suddenly remember something again. He opened his mouth, but closed it again. Seeing his hesitant look, everyone felt even more anxious. Yang Guanjin said anxiously, "You can tell me if there is anything you want. Don't worry, speak out boldly if you have anything to say." Sheriff Wang pulled him up from the ground and encouraged him. "Child, just say whatever you have to say. Don't be afraid. You tried your best and no one means to blame you." Even Zhou Huazheng stepped forward to comfort him. Under everyone's gaze and urging, Su Tong took a deep breath, as if he had gathered enough courage, and said, "Uncle Lee, he was fine at first, but suddenly he went crazy, muttering to himself. He was shouting something I couldn't understand, as if he was saying, 'What?' He thought carefully, it seems like some white ghost, some treasure, in the mountains." He spoke intermittently, and no one could understand him at all. But as soon as these words came out, the expressions of many people present became strange. Everyone seemed to have gotten some key information from this passage. Although Su Tong lowered his head, his eyes clearly saw the appearance of everyone's face. "What nonsense are you talking about? What nonsense?" Everyone looked different, but only the deputy director was scolding Su Tong, but things had become like this, and everyone could only persuade him to go back. "Li Laozi will be a bachelor all his life. Let us brothers stay here and dress him up." Several old people sighed and spoke. At this time, Su Tong raised his head. "Let me stay. I was the one who killed fourth uncle Li. Let me sort out the remains of fourth uncle. This is considered as my atonement." Several old people looked at each other and knew in their hearts that he was not entirely to blame for this incident. Even without him, there was no doctor in the forest farm for such a serious injury, and he would still have died in the end. However, seeing his insistence, several old people nodded and acquiesced. The crowd dispersed, followed by Zhou Huazheng and others. Looking at Zhou Huazheng and others leaving, Su Tong frowned slightly. The words he just said were naturally made by him. The purpose is not only to put down smoke bombs for these people, but also to test them. Zhou Huazheng and the others came here for this dagger, and I believe they must be particularly interested in the origin of the dagger. After hearing the keywords treasures on the mountain, you will naturally think of it. As for the white ghost, of course he was the one who attacked the lost dog last night. What surprised him was that after Zhou Huazheng heard the word, his face remained silent, but he saw his hands tremble slightly. No matter what, my goal was finally achieved. Su Tong walked into Sango's room, opened the door and saw Sango's body lying on the bed. After closing the door, he whispered, "Come out quickly, the time for the bottle of medicine you gave me is almost up." As he finished speaking, a small paper man came out from under the bed and danced towards Su Tong, not knowing what he was expressing. Su Tong placed the paper mannequin on the table, and at the same time took out the magic bell from the props book, shook it gently at the paper mannequin, and twitched the corner of his mouth. "Guard the soul. Lao San, are you sure that guy is really dead?" At the entrance of the cafeteria, the three young men brought by Zhou Huazheng were sitting on stone benches. Yang Zixuan, the leader, asked. "Dead. There is still residual heat in the body, but there is no life." Zhang Hu, who was regarded as the third child by Yang Zixuan, nodded firmly. After receiving this answer, Yang Zixuan couldn't help but feel a little regretful. "It's a pity, all the pigs were dead last time. I wanted to catch 2 more pigs, but one died first. What a waste. Isn't there another one?" Zhang Hu said with narrowed eyes. "But I don't think he looks like it." Yang Zixuan tapped his fingers lightly on the stone table in front of him. On their way here, they had already figured out the situation of the forest farm. Especially after learning that someone was trying to steal the golden dagger last night, They targeted Li Laozi and a young man named Chen Xiaoqiu. After all, it would be hard to explain why he worked so hard to protect this golden dagger if he were not a game player with a mission. But just now he saw the boy's expression when he was cursed by the deputy director and his panicked expression. Yang Zixuan couldn't help but feel a little unsure again. He's probably a novice. Third brother, go give him a try. If he's willing to give him some benefits, let him come to our team to coax him and get the information out of him. Then we can raise him like a pig in the next script world. Zhang Hu nodded and stood up and walked out. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly remembered something and turned around. What if he doesn't want to? Or what if he really is not a player? Yang Zixuan tapped his fingers on the table and looked sideways at Zhang Hu. I would rather kill by mistake than let go. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 27. Li Lao Si, what do you think you can do? On the mountain behind the forest farm, several old people looked at Li Laozi, who was placed in the pit and swept away by the grass, and they sighed inwardly. I remember that when they came, this place was still a desolate and barren mountain. Now, after so many years, the trees planted back then are now tall and straight. But the youth of these old guys is gone. Li Laozi has no heirs and no inheritance. The only thing that can accompany him is this forest that he planted with his own hands. After a few simple condolences, a few old people turned around and left. They were older, facing these trees and this empty grassland every day, and they had long understood the issues of life and death. Su Tong and several young people hurriedly covered it with soil. You go, let me stay with Mr. Li for a while longer. Su Tong covered his face and sat on a stone nearby. The young men who had eaten his beefcake before saw this and looked at each other. Some wanted to persuade him. After all, they all knew that this matter was not his fault. But they were inexperienced and didn't know how to persuade people. They could only say, hurry up, the mutton stew tonight will be gone if you get back late. After saying that, a few people walked down the mountain. After seeing everyone leave, he raised his head, looked around, and finally let out a long breath. He reached out and took the shovel in his hand, ready to start working. Suddenly, Su Tong's heart tightened and he turned around cautiously. He saw a figure sitting on a tree branch not far away, holding a big apple in his hand and eating it with relish. It's you. The guy in front of him was one of the 3 people who came with Zhou Huazheng and the others, and he was also responsible for inspecting the dead dog's body today. Did he see any flaw? Su Tong held the shovel in his hand, and quietly held a paper figurine in his hand with his other hand. It's me, we've met before, oh, I mean in the game lobby. Zhang Hu jumped down from the branch with a quick stride. At a height of 6 to 7 meters, he stood firmly without any effort on his body. Seeing that he didn't speak, Zhang Hu smiled and said, don't worry, I don't mean any harm. You must be a novice. I am an experienced player who has experienced the script world 5 times. Su Tong's heart moved when he heard this, and the tense expression on his face gradually relaxed. It turns out to be Senior. He, seeing him admit it, the smile on Zhang Hu's face became brighter. We lost a teammate in the last script, and there happens to be an empty spot in the team. Are you interested in joining our team? As he spoke, he walked to the grave of the lost dog, stepped on it with one foot and looked at the mound with disdain. I believe you have realized the difficulty of the script last night. If you are not strong enough, you have to use your brain more and keep working hard. To be reckless is to seek death. This. He lowered his head, as if hesitatingly weighing the pros and cons. Don't worry, if you join our team, you will get long-term protection in the future. By the way, you don't have an item card yet, so how about I give this to you as a meeting gift? Zhang Hu pinched his fingers and took out a prop card and placed it in front of Su Tong. It was a black and white card with a paper lantern on it. It looked like it should be some kind of item prop card. A greedy look appeared on Su Tong's face. In this case, of course I am willing to join you. He was about to reach out to take it. Zhang Hu raised his hand and said, "Hey, of course I can give you the stuff, but it's not for free. If you join the team in the future, if I see you not working hard, don't worry. Oh, by the way, what should I call you?" Su Tong reached out and took the prop card in his hand, and asked excitedly. "Just call me third brother. There will be action at 8 o'clock tonight. Don't be late. Come to our room as soon as possible." "Okay, okay." He nodded repeatedly, but his eyes never left the prop card in his hand. His greedy eyes looked like he had picked up a piece of pie in the sky. All this was naturally seen by Zhang Hu, who couldn't help but smile contemptuously at the guy in front of him, and said to himself, "Just enjoy this, you will know later that your third master's things are not so easy to get." Thinking of this tiger, he wandered down the mountain. Su Tong sat on the mound, continued to fiddle with the prop card, and casually put the prop card into the prop book. Red Mandarin Lantern. Human skin is used as a cover, human spine is used as bones, human hair is used as rope, human blood is used as oil. Additional skill 1, Red Mandarin Girl. At the cost of 5 script points, the resentful souls lodged in the lamp can be summoned to assist in combat, but the price is often heavy. Duration, 10 minutes. Cooling time, 24 hours. Note, after summoning the resentful spirit will randomly take away an organ from you as a price. Sure enough, it's not a good thing. Su Tong sighed inwardly, but the greedy expression on his face did not change. TCH. Rookie, how can a garbage card make you so happy? Behind the big tree, Zhang Hu turned his head sideways and muttered something in his mouth before turning around and leaving. However, Zhang Hu did not notice that after he left the woods, a small paper figure fell silently from the back of his clothes. "Come down." After confirming that the other party really left this time, the smile on Su Tong's face suddenly faded. He turned around, grabbed the shovel stuck in the ground, and dug hard at the grave of the missing dog. Call. Before digging too deep, I saw the mourning dog struggling out of the soil impatiently. He breathed heavily. If you slow down, I'll be doomed. I can't help it. If he doesn't leave, I'll be in big trouble if I dig you out," he said, reaching out his hand to pull the dead dog out of the soil. "By the way, I threw the shovel in my hand to him and asked him to fill in the grave again. Are you really planning to join their team? Don't blame me for not reminding you, this group of people said too well, maybe they just tricked you into joining the team and they plan to raise you like a pig." "Eh? Did you hear that?" Su Tong pretended to be surprised and looked at the mourning dog, and asked curiously, "What is a pig?" The mourning dog frowned and was very disgusted with the so-called pig team. He said with a serious expression, "What else can it be? Treat the newcomers in the team as pigs raised in captivity. They will be taken with them every time in the script world. When necessary, they will be used as cannon fodder. After completing the main mission and returning, they will be forced to submit all scripts in full." Because of the pig's support, the team grew very fast. They would even squeeze out the value of these pigs and directly slaughter them at the beginning of the new scenario world, causing the illusion of large-scale casualties in the team. It is said that this can greatly reduce the difficulty of the next script world. Although this statement has not been confirmed by the script library, it is indeed spread among players. Many players even call it the pig killing ceremony. The vast majority of players hate this kind of pig team, but there is nothing they can do about it. After all, there are several types of team contracts, and the contracts of the pig team are often the most unfair. Not only does the captain have absolute authority, but it is also difficult for the pigs to quit the team. This is why the bereaved dog must remind him to think carefully. In fact, it is difficult for novice players to know these things, but Sangu once formed a team and became famous, but later. Thinking of the past, Sangu's eyes became much sadder. So, as long as the other party pulls me into the team, I will be the meat on the display board, right? He continued to ask patiently. Yes, but in the script world, they cannot sign a formal contract with you, they can only sign a temporary contract. After saying that, Sangu raised his head and looked at Sutong, only to find that the guy was smiling, with a particularly bright smile on his thin cheeks. It was not the kind of sneer that was extremely angry, but a smile that was close to madness. The eyes were shining with light, like two blazing flames, revealing a kind of madness at the bottom of his voice. Sensing the strange look in the mourning dog's eyes, Sutong slowly lowered his head and whispered, "In other words, they are very fat." The mourning dog was startled, and nodded with a weird look on his face. Not only were these people fat, but they also had a lot of script points in their hands. What's more, he casually took out a prop card as bait. No matter how rubbish the prop card was, it would still be useless. It is enough to prove the strength of their team from the side. You don't mean to? Sango wanted to persuade Sutong that it was best not to make this idea. However, before he could speak, Sutong had already taken out all the prop cards in his hand and handed them to him, which even included the Ghost Craft book and the Demon Bell. Seeing the prop card he handed to him, Sango's expression suddenly turned strange. He probably understood what Sutong was thinking. But looking at the prop card handed to him, he still hesitated. Do you just believe me? Aren't you afraid that I will run away with these things? Sutong's face was buried in the sun, and he looked at the mourning dog with a calm expression. The biggest excitement of gambling is that you can either go bankrupt or become rich overnight. I'll do whatever you want. Confidence. Arrogant. Crazy. In just a short moment, countless thoughts flashed through Sangu's mind, and he once wondered whether this guy was a normal person. Even his only sense told him not to play with fire with this guy. However, after these thoughts flashed through Sangu's mind, they became an uncontrollable impulse, like an uncontrollable fire igniting in his heart, slowly rising up. He took the prop card from his hand, grinned and said, "You lunatic, don't let me lose too badly." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 28. Boom. Boom. At night, Sutong stood in front of the door, took a deep breath, and knocked lightly on the door. The door opened. When Zhang Hu saw it was him, his face suddenly showed joy. "Finally here, I thought you kid I have to break the appointment. I'm embarrassed to come here empty-handed, so I prepared a gift for my eldest brother." Sutong rubbed his hands back and forth on his trouser legs, with an awkward and uneasy expression, just like how you feel when the dean calls you to the door of the office. "Come in." A hoarse voice came from the door. Yang Zixuan was sitting on the bed, holding a game console in his hand and being absorbed in playing. But he had already fixed his eyes on Sutong, and his vicious eyes glanced up and down Sutong, like it's like you want to see this guy through and through. "Sit down," he pointed to the bench beside him. "Why?" Sutong sat on the chair, but he only dared to sit halfway up his buttocks. His legs were stretched tightly. He quickly took out his deerskin coat, placed it in front of Yang Zixuan and said, What is this clothes called? The little girl from Yang Guanjin made it, and it was very good, which, I gave it to my eldest brother as a greeting gift." The three of Yang Zixuan looked at each other, and the last scruples in their hearts disappeared. This was not the first time they had seen such a scene. In reality, Yang Zixuan is engaged in loan sharking or providing naked loans to students. Those poor students looked like this when they first met, or when they begged him for grace of time. After seeing many people, Yang Zixuan developed a pair of piercing eyes and became extremely confident in his ability to see people. From the moment this guy walked in until now, he could be sure that the guy in front of him named Chen Sukyo was indeed a rookie. Of course, what he likes the most is this kind of rookie. On the one hand, he is obedient, and on the other hand, he is easy to control. He does not need to worry about whether this guy will suddenly rebel and give them a bad blow. This kind of thing has not happened before. There have been such cases in the circle. There is a large-scale breeding team, because a ruthless character appeared in the pig, and they quietly worked hard to develop. In the end, they killed all 6 core members of the team, including their real family members. So what a qualified pig wants is a rookie with a submissive personality. Thinking of this, Yang Zixuan narrowed his eyes. From now on, you will be the 4th child. Don't worry, our team is the most fair. As long as you contribute more, I guarantee that you will not be short of a share of the benefits. Hey, Su Tong perked up and looked flattered, making Zhang and Zhanghu look at each other and smile involuntarily. Tell me, you have been here for so long. If you have any clues, tell me. Yes, yes. Su Tong nodded, and immediately told the truth about what they encountered when they came here. Among them, he was almost stoned to death when he came, and he found out about the golden dagger. He even told the story of the process of joining forces with the morning dog to guard the knife. Except for the fact that he was attacked by a monkey that night, which he concealed, almost all the information was revealed. Yang Zixuan listened carefully, and from time to time looked at Song Kuang, the second in command beside him. When he saw the second in command nodded without any trace, he couldn't help but think deeply. I didn't expect that there would be such a mysterious master. Yang Zixuan couldn't help but be a little surprised about the mysterious master who killed the dead dog that Su Tong said, because according to Su Tong's statement, the opponent is not only immune to physical damage, but also has strong mental attacks. Such plot characters are often not easy to deal with. Since the opponent is so strong, how did you survive last time? Zhang Hu suddenly turned back and looked at Su Tong. Su Tong looked a little embarrassed. Last time, I ran away. After he finished speaking, he took out his prop book and opened it. In addition to the bits and pieces and 2 gold bars, the most dazzling thing was the 2 cards in the prop book. One is the meeting gift red UN lantern given to him by Zhang Hu, and the other is naturally the title card given to him in the last script kill. Hey! You actually have a title card too. Yang Zixuan and others' eyes flashed, and they couldn't help but feel a little surprised. They carefully examined the information on the title card called Retributor. When they saw that this title card was actually immune to 80% mental damage and 30% physical damage, the 3 of them suddenly cursed in their hearts. It was simply a cruel creature. From their point of view, the ability of this title card was absolutely powerful. Even Xiong Tao, the second in command of the team, felt jealous after seeing it. Being able to avoid both mental and physical shields is an indispensable ability for any close combat player. Fortunately, this card is a title card and cannot be traded or transferred. Otherwise, at this moment, Yang Zixuan and the others would have exposed their fangs and eaten Su Tong alive, and would have asked him to spit out this card. Yes, the last script world gave me such a title after it was approved. Thanks to a guy named Li Bo. If it hadn't been for him, all of us would have died. Su Tong pretended not to see the greed in the eyes of the 3 of them, and exaggeratedly described the process of the last script world, except that everyone's roles were reversed. That's it? Yang Zixuan nodded, not doubting his words at all, and just whispered to the second and third children, remember, everyone should be careful when meeting this person named Li Bo in the future. Okay, the 2 nodded to note it down. I also know in my heart that people who dare to play like this when they are novices will either kill themselves early, or they will inevitably become stronger and stronger. When you encounter such a person, kill him if you can. If you can't kill him, stay away and don't provoke him. Boss, shall we continue our actions tonight? Zhang Hu looked at the time. It was almost 9 o'clock now, not long before the planned time they had planned. Yang Zixuan smiled mysteriously, of course, third brother, you can grab the dagger tonight. By the way, try not to kill anyone. The third child, Jong-hoo, nodded, don't worry, I still understand the principle of the repulsion effect. Fourth child, you and third child go together. It's up to you two tonight. After Yang Zixuan finished speaking, a prompt sounded in Su Tong's ear. Zhang team sends you a temporary teammate notification. Do you want to confirm to join the team temporarily? After joining the team, you can share team tasks and gain exclusive team privileges. Tip: once you join a temporary team, in this script world, you cannot cause any malicious harm to your teammates, otherwise you will be punished by being kicked out, deducting 10 script points from yourself, and suffering a stiffness penalty of 5 seconds. Tip: after joining a temporary team, you cannot leave the team directly within 12 hours. After 12 hours, you can pay 10 script points to apply for withdrawal or again pay 15 script points to force you to quit the team. Su Tong directly chose to confirm without any hesitation. After officially joining the team, he immediately got the task sharing in the team. Side mission: prepare to enter the mountain. Task description: at the morning meeting, the negotiations between Zhou Huazheng and Captain Wang had reached an impasse. Zhou Huazheng did not plan to stay here too long and planned to enter the mountain as soon as possible. Before entering the mountain, they needed a guide. Of course, it would be best if they could get key props. Task reminder: don't make any big noise, otherwise you will be responsible for the consequences. Looking at the mission, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly. He had already roughly thought that the target of Yang Zixuan and the others was Yang Guanjin, a forest ranger. After all, as a ranger, no one knows this place better than him. Go ahead. After completing the mission as soon as possible, we will go find Old Man Zhou. Then we will start the main mission and return as soon as possible after completing it. Yang Zixuan took a deep breath. As a breeding team, they had no interest in developing the script world or branch lines. Complete the main plot, breed pigs, collect a large number of script points, and use the script points to purchase more powerful props. This is the perfect game process for the breeding team. If this task was not unavoidable, they would not waste time on this task. Good. Zhang-hu nodded and walked out with Su Tong. The two of them went straight to the room where Captain Wang and the others were. On the way, Su Tong asked curiously, "Third brother, what is the repulsion effect?" Zhang-hu explained casually, "It's quite complicated. Anyway, you understand that you should not engage in large-scale massacres, anti-human behavior, and things outside of the plot, otherwise you will easily be rejected by the script world." Zhang-hu gave an example, taking Captain Wang and the others. They were going to grab something now, but if Captain Wang and the others were killed, it would be a major case that would alarm one party. At that time, it will inevitably cause huge waves, and they will also become the target of attack by the entire country. Think about it, when a group of People's Liberation Army uncles wearing Type 65 uniforms and Red Star helmets come to kill us, even if we have some strength, we are still looking for death. This is the repulsion effect. Su Tong thought for a while after hearing this. In other words, the repulsion effect is actually related to influence. If Captain Wang and the others chase into the mountains afterwards and are killed by us silently, the repulsion effect will be greatly reduced, right? Zhang-hu was stunned for a moment, thought for a while and said uncertainly, "It seems like this." While they were talking, the two of them had already approached the small building where Captain Wang and the others were. It was the only two-story small building in the forest farm. It was originally a house that the forest farm planned to allocate to the young people, but the matter of the old farm director was delayed. Now it is temporarily occupied by Captain Wang and others. The two-story small building has only one entrance and exit. There are people standing guard on the roof and gate to maximize safety. But to Zhang-hu, this was nothing but child's play. He turned around and grinned coldly at Su Tong, "Boy, let me show you today what the strength of a senior player is." As he finished speaking, Jong-Hu suddenly activated a prop card, and his figure disappeared little by little in front of him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 29. Invisible. Su Tong's pupils suddenly tightened, but he soon relaxed, because after taking a closer look, he discovered that Jong-Hu's ability was not invisibility, but a camouflage ability similar to that of a chameleon. The two abilities of invisibility and camouflage may seem very similar, but in fact they are very different. I won't go into details here, but if you look carefully, you can still find traces of Jong-Hu from the subtle changes. Wait for me here. Once the situation changes, you can retreat at any time and go to the boss's place to make peace. Jong-Hu's voice was low, but his confidence was extremely strong. He seemed not to care about any changes at all. The only thing he was worried about was people like Su Tong. After all, there were still very few high-quality pigs. Su Tong nodded numbly, and Jong-Hu swooped towards the police officer on guard at the door. In the dark night, the two police officers were completely unprepared. They only felt a strong wind blowing in their faces. When they realized that something was wrong, they slashed the back of their necks with a knife. Boom! With a low muffled sound, the two of them immediately fell to the ground. The whole process was completely smooth and as easy as picking a fruit. Jong-Hu grinned, threw aside the policeman who had been knocked unconscious on the ground, and sneaked into the building sideways. Seeing Jong-Hu disappearing into the corridor, Su Tong slowly narrowed his eyes and glanced at the stones under his feet. The wind blowing loudly on the roof of the outdoor building made people feel indescribably uncomfortable when it blew on their faces. The police officer standing on the roof of the building squinted his eyes and scanned the surroundings vigilantly, changing his position from left to right from time to time. At this moment, there was a sudden soft sound in the distance. He hurriedly poked his head out and saw a stone flying out of nowhere, drawing a beautiful parabola in mid-air and hitting it squarely on his face. Oh! A huge scream was particularly harsh in the dark night, and the lights in the entire corridor suddenly lit up. Who? Soon there was a thunderous sound in the building, and it was obvious that Jong-Hu had been discovered. As for Su Tong, after throwing the stone, he turned around and left without saying a word, and even paid no attention to the noise and fighting behind him. He did not go to meet Yang Zixuan and others as Jong-Hu said, but turned around and ran straight to Zhou Huashan's room. When he opened the door and took a look, it turned out that the room was already empty. Thinking about it, after all, since Zhou Huasheng ordered Yang Zixuan and the others to rob things and people, he certainly would not just sit there and wait for death. However, Su Tong still rummaged in the room. He remembered that when Zhou Huasheng came, he brought a large suitcase with him. Since he was going up the mountain, of course he would not take the suitcase with him. It didn't take long for him to find the big box under the bed. He didn't have time to look at the contents of the box, so he threw the box into the prop book and hurried away, heading straight for the poplar forest outside the forest farm. Although Yang Zixuan and the others never told him where Zhou Huasheng and them had arranged to meet. However, although the forest farm is not big, the surrounding trees are large and deep, and it is dark. It is unrealistic to expect an old man in his late 70s to go too far away to wait for them. So you don't need to think too much, and you can roughly guess that it is the poplar forest outside the forest farm. Firstly, the road is easy to walk, and secondly, the distance is close. After leaving the forest and walking to the left, you will see the endless mountain forest, which is undoubtedly the best place. When he hurried over and took a closer look, he found the sneaky Zhou Huasheng in the woods. This old guy has obviously been waiting here for a while, and he can smell the pungent smell of smoke around him without even getting close. Seeing the old man hiding in the woods and waiting eagerly, The smile on Su Tong's lips became more and more ferocious. He didn't understand and had no knowledge of conspiracies, but in the mental hospital, there was an old man who loved to steal other people's things. Once, when his roommate caught him in the act and was about to receive a tough lesson from them, the old man actually said that the person in the next bed forced him to steal it, and that he planned to use his things to frame him. In the end, the whole ward was in chaos and almost killed someone. The head nurse that day was also severely punished by the hospital, and the patient who wanted to beat him was locked up in a small dark room in the critical area. But nothing happened to him, and he was rewarded with a big chicken drumstick as a witness. Since then, he has memorized a saying, "Muddy the water in advance." Bang bang. Suddenly the sound of gunshots came from the forest farm, and Joe Hwashin's expression changed. How did this happen? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a shadow running over in the woods. Joe Hwashung wanted to hide, but it was too late. I saw a hand in the darkness grabbing his wrist. Joe, Mr. Joe, something happened, our people were arrested, let's run. Seeing the out-of-breath look of the young man in front of him, Joe Hwashin's mind couldn't turn around for a moment. No, aren't you that, Comrade Xiao Chen? It's too late to explain. He's dead. If you don't leave, you'll be in big trouble. Su Tong didn't give Joe Hwashung a chance to think about it, and pulled him and ran into the woods behind him. Of course Joe Hwashung was full of doubts, but when he heard that the person was dead, things got really big. His old face changed, and he was completely panicked for a moment. While running, he cursed, "What's going on? I told you not to make a big deal out of it quietly, so why didn't you listen? It's too late to explain. The matter is too complicated. Mr. Joe, please run forward along this road. My friend will meet you in the woods ahead. Don't stop." Su Tong pointed to the forest in front of him and said to Joe Hwashung. After hearing this, Joe Hwashung looked at the dark woods in the distance and couldn't help but become suspicious. But before he could think about it, he heard constant gunfire from the forest farm. Su Tong kept urging him to leave quickly. "Let's go quickly. It's too late if you don't leave. As long as you don't get caught, no matter what happens, Zhang Hu and the others will take care of it." Joe Hwashin's heart moved. Thinking about it, it was the same reason. No matter whether he could find the Ascension Bureau, he would never be charged with murder. Thinking of this, he stopped thinking about it and patted Su Tong's arm. "Comrade Xiao Chen, I will never thank you for your kindness. If I find Shengxian, no, ancient ruins in the future, I will definitely repay you well." As he spoke, he hurriedly turned around and ran in the direction Su Tong pointed. Seeing Joe Hwashung leave, Su Tong smiled coldly. "Idiot." After saying that, he turned around and returned to the forest farm. In less than 10 minutes, when he returned to the forest farm, he found that the forest farm was in complete chaos, with a fire burning on one side and constant gunfire on Zhang Hu's side. After Su Tong thought for a while, he walked directly towards Zhang Hu. In fact, logically speaking, with Zhang Hu's strength, how could several police officers be his opponents? As a result, when he quietly groped over and took a look, he was deeply shocked by the scene in front of him. I saw Captain Wang, who was usually plain-looking, fighting back and forth with Zhang Hu. Not only did he not expect it, but even Zhang Hu himself never expected that the Captain Wang in front of him was far stronger than he thought. I saw two people standing on the corridor. Facing Zhang Hu, a layer of ceramic-like armor appeared on Zhang Hu's body. The pistols of the surrounding police officers hit it, but it had no effect at all and was directly bounced away. He waved his fist and smashed it in front of him in a wide and open manner. Captain Wang was immediately forced into a corner. Seeing that there was no way out, Zhang Hu showed a ferocious smile. This guy had almost suffered a big loss just now. Even if he couldn't kill him, he would at least interrupt him. He has a few bones. Thinking of this, Tiger's face darkened. He raised his fist and punched Captain Wang's chest. It was a sure win, but Captain Wang suddenly crossed his arms and hit him hard. Just when Zhang Hu was about to withdraw his fist, Team Wang suddenly grabbed his wrist with both hands, pulled hard, and leaned forward with his strength. His legs were slightly arched, his waist was twisted upward, and his elbow was aimed at Zhang Hu's chest. Paste it? Boom. Zhang Hu's face turned the color of pig liver, and his body was pushed up and hit the wall behind him hard. Several cracks appeared on the ceramic armor on his body due to the elbow. Before he could get up, there was a gunshot and a bullet hit his chest. Suddenly Zhang Hu felt numbness in his chest, and then centered on that point, there was a tragic and severe pain that spread out like a spider web. Snapped. The muscles in his chest exploded, and even broken muscle fibers could be seen bursting out. He opened his mouth to scream, but what came out was blood. Looking at Zhang Hu getting up, Captain Wang spat blood, threw the pistol aside, and tore open the torn shirt on his body. His thin body seemed to have little flesh. But the bronzed muscles always give people a feeling of hard work, as if these muscles are made of steel that has been hammered countless times. Especially when his arms are open, the bat muscles under his armpits give people a strong sense of strength. Visual impact. Come on, I've been training in the army for almost 20 years, and there aren't many people I can fight with. Zhang Hu stood up with a dark face. Faced with Captain Wang's provocation, he covered his chest with his palms and evil fire surged through his eyes. He could no longer suppress his murderous intent. However, just when he was ready to ignore it and risk being scolded by his boss, he wanted to kill the man in front of him. Squeak. A sharp whistle came, and Zhang Hu's expression changed. He knew that the boss had succeeded, and was urging him to go back to gather quickly. The whistle was very rapid, which meant that the boss was impatient. After hesitating again and again, Zhang Hu took out something from the prop book and threw it forward with a dark face. Boom. Suddenly the entire corridor was covered in thick clouds of smoke. Cough cough cough. When the smoke cleared, Captain Wang and others saw that Zhang Huren had disappeared without a trace. Look for it quickly. It must be nearby. Seeing this, Captain Wang's face suddenly turned ugly. He was about to go back to pick up the gun, but he turned around and looked back. Where is my gun? Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 30. Seeing the fire burning in the distance getting bigger and bigger, Yang Zixuan's face turned extremely ugly. I thought that catching a little girl would be easy, but it turned out to be so bad. Fortunately, the person was finally caught. Only. Yang Zixuan looked to the other side not far away, and his mood suddenly became more anxious. Boss, you're back. The second child, Xiang Tao, raised his chin not far away, and saw the third child, Zhang Hu, stumbling over with blood at the corner of his mouth, obviously injured. What happened? Did you get the stuff? Seeing Zhang Hu's embarrassed appearance, Yang Zixuan felt even more annoyed and asked impatiently. I got it, I ran into a little trouble, but it doesn't matter, the policemen were not killed or injured, so the impact should not be big. Zhang Hu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, took out a bottle of potion from the prop book, and couldn't help but feel a little pain when he looked at the potion in his hand. Such recovery potions are often sold at extremely expensive prices at exhibitions, and it is said that only those with special channels can obtain them. But these people seem to have all agreed upon it, and strictly controlled the shipment volume at each exhibition, resulting in high prices. Even a breeding team like them would be charged a huge sum every time they purchased it. That pig, where's the fourth child? When Yang Zixuan saw that only one person came back, he couldn't help but ask. Zhang Hu was stunned, and when he was about to explain, he heard Su Tong jump out from a corner, brother, here, here. The three of them looked back and couldn't help but feel speechless. They saw that this guy had covered himself with mud. He looked like a clay man. It's only human nature to be greedy for life and afraid of death. But there are really not many people who are as timid as a mouse. See. Such a good title is in vain. The second child, Xiongtao, muttered with a look of resentment. But seeing Su Tong being so timid and cowardly, Yang Zixuan's anxious mood suddenly improved a lot. Being timid is good, timid people live longer, and as time goes by, they can continue to provide them with script points. Obviously this is the characteristic of a qualified pig. Although they made some mistakes in the script world last time, if it weren't for the cleverness of those pigs, they wouldn't have suffered heavy losses, and all the pigs that had finally been raised would have been ruined. Okay, everyone is here, let's go quickly. Yang Zixuan waved his hand, urging Su Tong and the others to leave the forest farm quickly. Su Tong supported the injured Zhang Hu, his third child, and couldn't help but look at Yang Guanjin, who was being held up by Xiongtao on his shoulders. At this time, Yang Guanjin was tightly tied with a rope, and her mouth was tied with a cloth strip. It seemed like there was something stuffed inside, making her speechless. Only those eyes were staring at her. His angry eyes seemed to be asking him why he got together with these people. Su Tong looked at his nose with his eyes and his heart with his nose, pretending not to notice. After leaving the forest farm, they hurried to the place they had agreed with Zhou Huazheng. Looking around, Yang Zixuan couldn't help but frown. Mr. Zhou, Mr. Zhou. Yang Zixuan called several times but no one answered. Boss, are you looking in the wrong place? Zhang Hu looked around, but there was a seedling garden in front of the forest farm that could not hide people. This was the only place that could hide people. Even if Zhou Huazheng was old and confused, he would not forget the seedling garden drill. For some reason, Yang Zixuan suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Quickly, look for it, you can't go wrong, it must be this place. After hearing this, the four of them separated and searched in the woods, but no matter how they searched, they could not find any trace of Zhou Huazheng. Yang Zixuan was completely panicked now. Can you not panic? They agreed to go and rob people and things, but when they got the things back, the mastermind disappeared? This is like your eldest cousin inviting you to a seafood feast and asking you to order like crazy. At the end of the checkout, your eldest cousin disappeared and took away 2 pieces of soft Chinese food, like a box of wool yanjai. Damn it, this old guy is not playing tricks on us. Zhang Hu was so angry that he stamped his feet and cursed. Along the way, they called themselves teacher to their left and Mr. Zhou to their right, pretending to be like their grandsons. But what happened to them? Head, come and see. At this moment, Su Tong suddenly shouted from the side. He pointed to the cigarette butts on the ground. Look, these cigarette butts are quite new. I think Mr. Zhou may really be waiting for us here. When Yang Zixuan heard this, he picked up a cigarette butt and saw that it was the front door where Mr. Zhou usually smoked. No. I'm afraid someone may have taken the lead before us and kidnapped him. Yang Zixuan glanced around, but couldn't find any clues. He clenched his fists in annoyance. At this moment, someone was already chasing him from the forest farm. Upon seeing this, Xiongtao hurriedly said, Boss, the police are chasing us. Otherwise, we should retreat first. Yang Zixuan's normally gentle face was now distorted into a furious lion, but in the end all the anger turned into an indignant helplessness. Let's go. Even though the 3 of them are strong enough, they are not strong enough to touch the bottom line of the repulsion effect. Things really get out of hand. Let alone completing the main mission, it is still unknown whether they can return alive. The 4 of them hurriedly took Yang Guanjin away. As soon as they left, Team Wang led his men to search in the woods. They didn't know how far they ran, but when they looked back, they saw that the surrounding trees were so thick and thick that even the moonlight couldn't shine through them. After the shadow of the forest farm was no longer visible, the 4 of them slowed down and found a place to sit down. Zhang Hu and Xiong Tao loudly cursed this old guy Zhou Huazheng. They were simply cheating on their father. At the moment, they don't give any prompts for side tasks, and they don't say whether they are completed or not. The most terrible thing is that now they have robbed people and things, the police have been offended, the forest farm has been burned, the bad things have been done, and Zhou Huazheng is missing? What about their next main mission? Boss, what should we do next? After scolding for a while, the two of them could no longer curse and could only look at Yang Zixuan. He slowly raised his head in the darkness, his two pairs of eyes glowing green like evil wolves, and his cold eyes were obviously on the verge of rage. But it seemed that besides being annoyed, he didn't have a clue right now. Boss, tell me, could it be that I was kidnapped by that mysterious man? At this time, Su Tong said cautiously. Mystery man. Yang Zixuan turned around silently, staring at Su Tong with his cold eyes. Yes, think about it. The mysterious man didn't succeed in grabbing the golden dagger last time. He definitely wouldn't give up. Since he didn't get the dagger, he simply robbed the person. Su Tong looked like he was thinking hard. When he saw Yang Zixuan looking at him, he quickly waved his hands and said, I was just imagining it. Boss, don't blame me if you think what I said is wrong. After all, how can a living person disappear out of thin air? Yeah, how could we forget about this guy? Zhang Hu sat aside and upon hearing this, he patted Su Tong's shoulder hard, almost knocking Su Tong to the ground. Just listen to Zhang Hu say, Boss, this must be the case. Old man Zhou is looking for the Immortal Bureau, saying that the dagger may be the key to the Immortal Bureau. The mysterious man also grabbed the dagger, which means he also knows about the Immortal Bureau. He arrested Zhou. The old man holds the key to the Immortal Ascension Bureau. After saying that, he didn't forget to add, if it were me, I would arrest old man Zhou too. After Xiong Tao was silent for a moment, he said in a deep voice, I'm afraid it's just him. I guess the most likely possibility is that he saw us taking things and didn't want to conflict with us, so he robbed Professor Zhou. Su Tong stood aside silently. Looking at the lucid analysis of the two men, he almost couldn't help laughing wildly in his heart. This is the sleeping dragon and the phoenix chick. Yang Zixuan originally had doubts about Su Tong's words, but he couldn't help but the two people around him kept analyzing it for him. In addition, he was also very confused and had no idea, so it sounded like that. The mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole follows behind. After cursing in a low voice, he stood up and said, this matter is not over yet, get ready to go. Boss, where are we going? Su Tong hurriedly stood up and asked, only to hear Yang Zixuan raise his eyebrows, look at the mountains and forests in the distance and said, every change is inseparable from its section. If we find the Immortal Ascension Bureau, we won't be afraid of not finding old man Zhou. Meanwhile, in the woods on the other side, a group of police officers were searching carefully in the woods. At this time, Team Wang suddenly saw a cigarette butt on the ground. He picked it up and looked at it. He recognized it at a glance. It was the front door where Zhou Huazheng smoked. Besides, there was no one else except him. He was familiar with the old men who smoked in the entire forest farm. They only smoked dry cigarette rods, and no one smoked this kind of cigarettes. Can't be wrong. Dropping the cigarette butt, Captain Wang's face was uncertain for a moment, and he had already concluded in his mind that this matter was probably caused by an old guy like Zhou Huazheng. Team Wang, what should we do next? Do we want to report to the county? A police officer came forward and asked. Team Wang frowned, glanced at him with cold eyes, and said with a sneer on his face, report? Tell the director that not only did we fail to solve the case, but we also lost the evidence. The other party ran away right under our noses. The police officer blushed and immediately lowered his head, not daring to say any more. Captain Wang actually had one thing he didn't say, which was that his gun was also lost, and there were still 6 bullets in it. there was still a way for him to resolve the matter of missing evidence, so it was normal that the case was not solved. But his gun was lost, and there were still 6 bullets in it. If this matter was reported to the police, he, the captain, would probably come to an end. So no matter what, even if the case is not solved, the gun must be recovered. But the question is, where did this group of people run to now? Looking at the dark mountains and forests in the distance, he couldn't help but feel a little desperate. However, there is a saying that there is no perfect way to go. Just when Captain Wang was falling into despair, a police officer suddenly rushed out of the forest farm, panting, and ran to Captain Wang and said, "Captain, Captain, we found it." The gun was found. Captain Wang was refreshed and his eyes were shining. But the police officer shook his head. No, it was the old man named Joe who found him. He was tied up and thrown into the pig pen. Ah! Upon hearing this, Captain Wang was stunned for a moment and stood there for 3 seconds, his mind still spinning. After a while, he came back to his senses and hurried to the pig pen with others to take a look. In the smelly pigsty, an old man was tied to a pillar of the pigsty, his mouth tightly gagged. Captain Wang was completely confused now. After reaching out and pulling out the rag from the old man's mouth, he heard Joe Huashan's bloodshot eyes widen like bells, roaring with grievance and anger, "Liar! You! This liar!